Batman returns. Again. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. We start, though, with a security advisory. If you're a podcast host or directory and you have any redirects or links pointing to panoply.fm, we would suggest removing them now to protect your visitors and protect your SEO. Spotify, which now owns Panoply, which of course is now called Megaphone, allowed that domain name to lapse earlier this year. Panoply.fm has now been purchased by a company that hosts viruses and malware. We've removed all links to Panoply.fm from podnews.net. We would strongly urge you to do the same. Spotify has announced that there'll be a Season 2 of Batman Unburied. Speaking in a panel live from Spotify Beach at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity, Spotify's Chief Content and Ads Business Officer Dawn Ostroff announced that a second series had received a green light from the company. Not surprising, really. The first season was made available on May the 3rd in 9 languages and quickly hit the #1 spot in 11 markets for more than 2 weeks. iHeartMedia was also at Cannes on the iHeart yacht. Topics covered were diversity and representation, LGBTQ+ visibility, and NFTs in media. They launched their first NFT-hosted show. There was also an iHeartMedia party. Sam Smith sang, and Paris Hilton did an exclusive DJ set, although if you went to Podcast Movement Evolutions earlier this year, not that exclusive. Acast Plus has announced an integration with Facebook. It allows Acast Plus subscribers to offer members-only Facebook groups as a launch partner of new Facebook functionality. Patreon offers a similar integration with Discord. Sounds Profitable's The Creators research into the people who make podcasts was released to sponsors yesterday. The public presentation is in a webinar on June the 28th. And as a sponsor, we can tell you that there are some surprising discoveries. Squadcast has released a sneak preview of the redesigned Squadcast studio and backstage. Next week, the Podland podcast will have a full interview with the co-founders, and the show will be co-hosted by Squadcast's Ariel Nissenblatt. Audio cleanup service Loudness.fm is now out of beta. It's a service that reduces background noise, balances levels, and makes it all the right loudness. Edison Research's Gabriel Soto is to speak at Podcast Movement, presenting the opportunities that Edison Research sees for podcasters in 2022. Podcast Movement has also announced another set of speakers for their event in Dallas this August. We note that Kai Chuck from YouTube is also slated as a speaker. Podcasts are more popular in larger markets, according to a US study. 31% listen weekly in the largest media markets in the US, like New York or Los Angeles or Chicago. But weekly listeners fall to 17% in smaller markets like Fargo, Bakersfield and Amarillo, wherever they are. Does anyone know the way to Amarillo? The International Women's Podcast Festival was last weekend. Pod Bible's Francesca Turauskis writes about her day. And writing in his Stratechery newsletter, Ben Thompson notes that over half of my subscribers now listen to the updates instead of reading them, and that the Spotify app accounts for 33% of his plays. He adds that this has, quote, strengthened my personal conviction that there remains considerable upside in the podcast market broadly. And in podcast news, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet has joined ARN's iHeart Podcast Network Australia. The show is with comedian Peter Hellier, and it features chats with celebrity movie lovers about classic and beloved films they haven't quite got around to seeing until now. New Home is new from Australia's SBS this week. Hear from migrant and refugee women who are quietly building new lives in regional Australia. And My Cat's Tale is brand new from Ewan Spence, a BAFTA-nominated podcaster who wears a kilt quite often. It's the tale of cats who found their forever home and owners who have taken them into their lives, sometimes in surprising ways. It sounds perfect. And if you're missing out on our newsletter every day, you're missing out on tips and tricks every day. You're missing 3 sessions from the podcast show and the best way to create podcast intros. And you're also missing a little series we're running at the moment around podcast ads in the wild and a picture of a huge billboard in Times Square. But that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.